Come in, if you dare. Welcome to a world of the fantastic and the macabre. Welcome to Ghost Stories YYC. Prepare yourself for a tale of terror. Written by Patrick Moskwa, with art by Patrick Moskwa. The Hidden Children. Jacob. I hated the man, despised him. He'd yell at me, tell me I was worthless, criticize everything I did. I wasn't Ira, and never could be. It was a struggle I could only attest to, him wanting that one last moment. Regardless of that, I would have done anything for him. I loved him. June. Adoration, respect, desire, compassion, but not love. He loved all of us deeply, but not like he loved Ira. Seeing him mourn and crave that one last moment was absolutely heart-wrenching. Adil. None of us could live up to Ira. What was it about Ira that was so mesmerizing? Why did we feel so haunted? What more could we do to be like him? Week by week, we'd watch as his sorrow grew. He'd hide himself in his studio for days on end. As time went by, we could go weeks without seeing him, only hearing the splash of tears hit the floor of his studio. Sonia. He was my father, brother, best friend, confidant, my leader. Every day I'd sneak into his studio and leave him a message before he'd wake up to brighten his day and show him that we loved him. We all worked hard to make sure that he knew that there was nothing we wouldn't do for him. When he did spend time with us, his heart would glow, his eyes would sing. It was magical as the first day we met. Those moments let us know how Ira felt. We wanted to make sure he could feel that way again someday. Horatio. We wanted to be true to Ira, embrace his imperfections, replicate his passions, echo his thoughts, the way he'd write, the way he'd dance. We only had his stories. There was no trace of photographs or videos, nothing, just his stories. From what I could tell, we nailed it. Jacob. That morning brought us all to tears. The rush to the hospital was the most frightened and lonely I've ever felt. The year that followed felt like a decade. Silence fell over him. All we saw were eye movements, the occasional breath that sounded like Ira's name. That was it. June. We spent the first week there, all of us, until the nurses asked that we only visit one or two at a time. It felt like home in a way. Instead of being called to his studio one by one or sometimes in pairs, the nurses would call us to his side. Adil. One by one, and sometimes in pairs, he'd call us to his studio. We'd draw, write, take photos, sing, dance, make movies, make love. We'd hear stories, we'd tell stories. That was all over now. Now we'd go visit, only to sit in a stale room watching him breathe, unanimated. Drip of the IV was the only thing to break the silence. It was maddening. Sonia. I couldn't stop crying. I would take my notes to him. I would read them, hoping to catch a bit of movement, a spark, something that told me he still heard us. It happened. He smiled. Horatio. Ira, was all Sonia said. We were there on Saturday morning. They read their notes to him, and ones from the others. June's message mentioned Ira, and a smile came across his face. The room suddenly felt warmer. Jacob. It was a collective idea. We'd all been thinking about it in our own way for some time. We'd all started years ago, trying to improve ourselves, make ourselves more like Ira. We all figured it out the same day at the hospital. The nurses let us come in for his birthday. We were there together, singing, laughing, joking. He smiled. We would never be Ira individually, rather Ira was all of us, parts of us, and none of us at once. I guess that's why he gathered us to live with him after he lost Ira. June. From that day, the nurses started asking us to come as a group once a week. We'd show up, start talking to each other, holding his hand, telling his stories of Ira, and his face would light up. It happened every Sunday. Adil. It was enchanting to watch him when he knew we were all together. It must have been the sound of our voices, the warmth of our collective breath, Sonia's giggles, Jacob's lisp, the way Horatio would drag his feet across the floor. There was no question it was all of us together that made him smile. Sonia. I knew we needed to do something more than just show up together. We all knew it. Warmth seemed to fill every corner of the room, the corners of his smile, and the folds in his eyes. So we had to figure it out. There was no other way. Horatio. He was a perfectionist, but he wasn't looking for perfection. He never was. He was looking for truth. I think that is where we made our mistake, but we eventually corrected it. Jacob. Sonia emphatically offered to be the first. Sonia's sleeves rolled up, started piecing things together. Notes, images, sounds. Sonia was going to be the first, no questions asked. We all thought it was crazy, but none of us ever questioned the motive nor the idea. We just knew it was going to happen. That was it. There were 5 of us at the time, so we knew we had plenty to work with. Adil. I was skeptical at first for sure. Who wouldn't be? Sonia was adamant that we could figure it out. Slowly, and with a great deal of work, we started pulling it off. There were a few things we were missing, so we'd go out and find what we needed. Sonia was a rock, kept saying it wasn't right, and to do it again. Day after day, week after week, eye after eye, ear after ear, vocal cord after vocal cord. June. It wasn't about getting it exact. It was about capturing the essence to a point where we had captured a ghost. We all began to slowly disappear. One by one, and sometimes in pairs, we would trade some part of ourselves. None of us questioned it, we just did it. Sonia. We had no other plan, but it didn't matter because I knew it was going to work. We were all still there, just not in our entirety. We became parts of each other. I was so excited each time we added something new, each time we replaced something, every time we removed something. Eyelids, fingernails, the odd tooth, the rhythm of our hearts. Horatio. It took a long time, much longer than we anticipated, but each time we grew, we changed, we became new, different, but the same. The little mistakes we made along the way were just excuses to make sure we got it right. The essence. We were in search of perfection from the corner of our eye. We began to hide. Each day, each month, we became something else altogether. We became Ira. The days got shorter. Winter was settling in. We had a few things left to finish and a bit more healing when we got the call from the hospital. He opened his eyes. It was time. He couldn't see very well. After 3 years with his eyes shut, they needed time to adjust to bright lights. They were still foggy, but he could see our faded figures. The nurses didn't really notice anything happen over the last 2.5 years despite all the trading we had done. Our names were mistaken as time went on, so we could tell it was working. Him. They were all there. I could still only see blurry figures in the distance, but could see more clearly up close, muddled but stronger. They walked in and stood around the foot of the bed, as they usually did. They approached the side of the bed in front of the window. Draped in a veil of light, face hidden in the shadows, Ira stood over me, holding my hand as if not a single day had passed. He introduced himself as Sonia.